Welcome to the first proper episode of Hannya's Advocate. For those of you who may have missed the video before this one, this is a series where I will discuss some unpopular opinions regarding the Yakuza series, or opinions that are simply divisive in nature. Today, the topic of discussion is the infamous Yakuza 3, often referred to as Blockuza 3. A game that many people dislike due to its slow narrative build-up and an AI that blocks or evades most of your attacks. The game by itself serves as a roadblock of sorts, dividing the people who enjoy Yakuza in a more casual setting from those who'd eventually try out everything the series has to offer. To explain why that's the case, we need to look at the games that preceded it in regards to the overall narrative. With the success of Yakuza 0 in the West, the prospect of reintroducing the entire series to newly intrigued consumers was explored via remakes of the first two Yakuza games. After Kiwami 2's release, however, the Western fanbase have reached a wall, since 3 of the remaining mainline games were only accessible through the PS3. Rather than do a poor job of remaking those lengthy titles, RGG Studios decided to release Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 as remasters, in tune with the mechanical depth the games had at the time they were first conceived. Yakuza 3 in particular was an incredibly important title for the franchise, because it was the first mainline entry to show the environments in a full 3D setting. One of the issues, however, was the fact that it was developed for the PS3, and at an early point in the console's lifespan. To this day, the early era of the PS3 remains infamous, because the system was very hard to come to grips with, even for the people who created it. While RGG Studios did make a game for the PS3 before Yakuza 3, that being Ryu-Kyu Kenzan, there weren't that many assets that could be carried over between the two games, due to substantial differences in the core gameplay and environmental design. Since the Yakuza games have always had pretty short development cycles, with a heap of content to implement, some issues were bound to show, and one of them was the AI's insistence on blocking. I will admit that this is an annoying thing to deal with at first, but ultimately, this bug of sorts wasn't something that would completely ruin the combat experience, but actually enhance it. Allow me to explain. Yakuza 0, and even more so Kiwami 2, were incredibly beginner-friendly. While button mashing wouldn't get you anywhere against someone like Amon, the in-game bosses became laughably easy due to the quick experience gain and general ease of use. With some of the fighting styles giving you super armor while you attack, for example Beast and Slugger, and your experience system being replaced with the currency you owned, becoming overpowered was pretty easy to achieve in Yakuza 0. In Kiwami 2, the addition of overpowered weapons and gear would break the core gameplay even further than it was in Yakuza 6. Kiwami 1 had a more aggressive AI, but ultimately, you could go through the game by repeating the same combo and just spamming heat actions. You didn't have to worry about the final hit of your combo being a guard break or a launcher. You didn't even have to worry about repeating the same heat actions too often, because every encounter would end before the eventual damage decrease would even be an issue. So, now when you look at Yakuza 3 by comparison, things feel a bit clunky in the beginning. Switching to this, from the fluid animations of the Dragon Engine, makes you feel that your movement is overtly restricted, even though that's only the case in the starting stages of the playthrough, similar to the other mainlines. Though, the main difference between Yakuza 3 and the other games, beyond the basic block spamming, is the fundamental approach to combat. Since titles like 0 and Kiwami 2 were more beginner-friendly, having an aggressive approach in combat always paid off. If you threw the first punch, the AI stun would make sure you'd quickly finish the encounter. In Yakuza 3, however, the emphasis is more so on baiting out the opponent's moves in order to do massive damage. Rather than spamming multi-hit combos to no avail, a timely implementation of sidestep punches, the Kamaki parry, and the legendary Tiger Drop is what makes the combat really stand out. Mind you, the PS2 and PS3 games were much more demanding in regards to the timing needed to execute moves like the Tiger Drop. But when you take into account the AI's general behavior and intensified movement, you simply reach a point where you can perfectly spam Tiger Drops against an opponent who infinitely rolls towards you. Though, to be fair, it takes quite a while until Kamaki's training becomes available to you, specifically after beating a sub-story in Chapter 5. So, what do you do until then? Well, grab. While not as profound as frame-perfect super moves, grabbing an opponent who keeps blocking in order to open him up for a proper combo later is the easiest workaround to use in the early game. It will also take several throws until the AI starts resisting your grab spams. Now, if the over-reliance on grabs doesn't suit you either, let's take a look at Kiryu's default combos. As is evident from the beginning of the series, the length of your square combo prior to the finishing move will result in different advantages for the player. Prior to 3, you didn't have to bother about the specific multi-hit combo that you would use, but now you'll have to make a conscious decision of the finisher you would use against the AI to have the best effect in the long run. Similarly to grab spamming, another common technique beginner players rely on is the multi-hit combo ending in a guard break. While I wouldn't recommend spamming this particular move too often, it makes for a good panic move if your opponent is low on health and you're out of other options. Alternatively, splicing this move in, on occasion, and stunning the enemy can open up the opportunity for additional combat loops, like the one with the Tiger Drop. Lastly, I would like you to pay attention to the assortment of heat actions available in Yakuza 3. As was stated before, a common characteristic of Yakuza's combat system is that repeating the same heat action in an encounter will result in less and less damage being dealt. Yakuza 3 takes this to a different level by the general damage output also being lessened when compared to that of the newer titles. Now more than ever, you will notice the importance of using the environmentals to your advantage beyond the all-reliable Kiryu plus bike equals death. Diversity in the amount of heat actions that is available to you can be your saving grace as you level up. But you'll also notice that different disposable items sometimes have identical heat actions, which further incentivizes you to think on your feet. All of these basic variables make Yakuza 3 a proving ground for the players, as is the namesake of the infamous category in the climax battles. This game is the counter-argument to the generally accepted premise of sticking to what works, which in this instance would relate to spamming easy moves in combat non-stop. Admittedly, unless you're someone who cherishes games with exquisite combo depth, you probably won't bother trying everything out. And this isn't to say that the people who dislike the combats of Yakuza 3 are bad at the game, but rather that the previous games disincentivize them from using a large portion of the fighting repertoire. And this is a shame, because upon going through Yakuza 3, you'll find the other games a lot more fun to play as well, because you'll be more aware of the actual depth the combat system has, while also being excited about implementing the new moves into your existing repertoire. To conclude, while the general difficulty of Yakuza 3 is higher than the rest of the series, that doesn't make the game, nor its approach to combat, bad. While it does have its issues, the number of improvements that it made in regards to the fluidity and diversity of movement and combat, when compared to the PS2 titles, makes Yakuza 3 one of the most important titles in this lengthy franchise, which served to further evolve said combat to where it is today with titles like Lost Judgment. So, if this video made you look at Yakuza 3 in a different way, I'm glad that it did, and I hope to see you in the next episode of Hannya's Advocate, whenever that may be. Until then, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!